sir. Okay. So if you can speak into this for the translation.
Okay, thank you. It is great honor for me to come to make a speech here. So first of all, I would thank the Confucius Institution of Zagreb University, and as well as the Zagreb Chamber of Economy. So before making my speech, I would like to mention 3 points. The first one is due to the time shortage. So I just give some guidelines for the dispute settlement in China. And the second is, in order to compensation the shortage of time, I bring all the legal, or almost all the legal documents which I mentioned or connection with my speech. So if you are interested to learn more, please ask me to give you a copy. I bring all these documents here. And third is as some of you know, in China, quite a number of law professors, and as well as they practice law at the same time, we call the part-time lawyer. So I was one of the part-time lawyers in Shanghai. So due to the personal reasons, I did not practice law as a lawyer for the past several years. But I can recommend some good lawyers or bad lawyers in Shanghai if you need some help or if you make some investment in Shanghai, in China. I'm sure maybe they are not the best, but at least good lawyers, not bad lawyers, okay? Let's come to my speech. My speech is the dispute settlement in business. So someone said, there is a business, there is a dispute. So I think I can accept this notion. So here, I just give some background or guidelines. How many ways to settle the dispute in China? Legally speaking, there are 6 means, but there are some difference. From number 1 to number 4 may be frequently used in China. But the last 2, investment dispute settlement or dispute settlement in the WTO, is a special way. So I will mention some in detail later on. So first is the negotiation. Maybe most of you know, for the businessman, this is the best way to set the dispute among the parties. Why? I gave some advantages if you use the negotiation to set the dispute. First, you can friendly set the disputes through the negotiation. And the second is peacefully, and no need argument in the court or in the arbitration court. And the third is voluntary, of course. No one forces you to use this way to set the dispute. And third, maybe most important to the businessman, the secure. It is a secure way, just only the parties who are involved in the dispute, no third parties. Maybe disputes connected with some trade secret or some other technology secret as well. So the next is positively. Of course, this is you can control which means, on which days you can solve, you can try to set the dispute. And the whole process you can wholly control. And economically, of course. You just spend the time, no money cost. If you find a lawyer to set the bills, of course, you have to pay. So many advantages if you use the negotiation to solve your disputes, but there is a disadvantage. Of course, sometimes due to the reasons, there's no possible to solve the dispute using the negotiation. Or someone cannot make any compromise, cannot reach any agreement for the settlement of dispute. So, this is the one way. The second way is the mediation. Maybe some of you know this kind of method used in China is a traditional way to solve the dispute, both domestically and internationally. Of course, the distinction between the negotiation and the mediation, there's a third party join the process of solving the dispute. We call in China or even in Shanghai, I come from Shanghai. In Chinese, we 老娘舅. In English, the old uncle. So, is there any disputes aroused in the family? They ask the old uncle to make the judgment, to solve the disputes among the family members. So of course, in the business, this is also very useful method used in China. So you may find that even in the arbitration, even in the court, they also use the mediation. So arbitration, mediation in arbitration court, mediation in the People's Court. So, of course, you may find, though there is a third party joining the process of the settlement of dispute, they have most of the same characteristics in comparison with the negotiations. Are there any shortage for the mediation? There are, of course. One is the same as the way used the negotiation method. Maybe some time pass, there's no any result through the mediation. No one cannot make any compromise. This is one. And the second is, so legally speaking in China, there's no binding if you reach any agreement through the mediation. So sometimes you have the agreement to solve the dispute through the mediation. But if one of the parties or both parties are not carry on this agreement, there's no any use. Of course, during the development of the legal system, China will try to solve this kind of disadvantages using the mediation to settle disputes. And the third one is the arbitration. So arbitration in China, there is a historical development. So these 4 points I should have mentioned when I'm dealing with the method of arbitration to settle the dispute. Of course, I give you a very brief introduction to the historical development of arbitration. And second is the arbitration law in China. And third is very important, the arbitration bodies in China. And the fourth, there's a typical arbitration body in China, which is dealing with the foreign elements dispute. This is the CTAC, the China International Economic and Trade Arbitration Commission. I will mention some roles in the CTAC. Okay, first one. So arbitration is not the original method used in China to solve the problems. Where maybe in my mind, in my opinion, they introduced from abroad. So China, or sometimes in China we call New China, which was founded in 1949. So in the international trade, it was the first time to use the arbitration way to solve the disputes among the Chinese businessmen with the foreigners. In 1946, the State Council set up the rules to integrate, to give the regulation to the arbitration ways that I mentioned is a CTAC. At that time, it called the China International Trade Arbitration Rule. So for quite a number of years, nearly more than 50 years, this body, CTAC, has dealing with quite a number of cases involving foreigners. In some year, in my mind, maybe in the later 1990s, in last century, and early in this century, the numbers of the cases who deal with is the number 1 in the world. So this is very important. So later on, the arbitration way to solve the disputes expanded to many kinds of fields, both in the social life as well as in the business circles. So in the circle life, you may find the residents have the dispute. They may go to the we call the resident committee. And there's a people who solve the disputes among the residents. In the business circle, of course, there are quite a number difference. For instance, the labor disputes, there's a special arbitration committee set up in the bureau or in the district. Or in construction field, there is a construction arbitration committee. If there's any disputes connecting with the construction field, they come to this body to solve their dispute. So, in 1995, China first adopted the arbitration law. So the arbitration law unified all the rules all over China. Of course, nearly 20 years has passed. So some professionals, some businessmen want to make the revision of this law, or this law. Okay, this is some brief historical development. So arbitration law in China, as I mentioned just now, it has altogether 8 chapters and 80 articles. The 8 chapters, for instance, is the general provisions, arbitration commissions, and arbitration agreement, arbitration procedures, and etc. So some important that I mentioned later on, okay? So about the arbitration body. So before 1995, there's only one arbitration body, or maybe 2. There is a special, at the CTAC, there is the Maritime Arbitration Body, the Maritime Arbitration Commission. So there's only one in the arbitration body who deal with the international trade, international trade. So after the founding of the arbitration law in 1995, there are quite a number of arbitration bodies. So according to arbitration law, every municipals, principals, automatic regions at least have one arbitration body. Like Shanghai, for example, is a municipality. There is Shanghai Arbitration Commission. I'm one of the arbitrators in that arbitration. So take Zhejiang or Jiangsu, the province. Of course, in the capital of the province, there is arbitration body. But under the provincial level, there is a district level. Usually, many of the district level, they have their arbitration body. So if you any dispute, you want to find the suitable arbitration body, you can choose any one of them. There's no district restriction. There's no different level. They are not, for example, in Jiangsu province, there are quite a number of arbitration bodies. In the Nanking, there is arbitration commission. There are some districts, there are quite a number of arbitration bodies. They're not sub-bodies to the Nanjing. They are independent. And, okay, that's something about the arbitration. Then the litigation. So 4 points I should mention under the litigation. First is the civil procedure law of the PIC. And the second is the People's Court in China and mediation in the court proceedings, as I mentioned just now. And the last is the jurisdiction. So first, civil procedure law. It was the first adopted at the fourth session of the 7th National People's Congress on April 9, 1991, and amended twice at October 28, 2003, and August 31, 2012. And it has altogether 27 chapters and more than 200 articles or provisions. It's a quite long law in China, with the compensation with the other laws. So in China, the court system, there are 4 levels of the People's Court. So the lowest level, or the first level, is the basic People's Court. Take Shanghai, for example. Shanghai have altogether 18 basic People's Court. Based on the districts or the counties, they have 1 court. And the second level is the intermediate People's Court. So every city have an intermediate court, only 1 intermediate court. Take Shanghai, Beijing, for example. There are 2 intermediate courts because it's 2 big cities in China. We call, in Shanghai, for example, we are the number 1 intermediate People's Court, number 2 intermediate People's Court. And the third is the High People's Court. So every municipalities, province, autonomous regions has 1 higher People's Court, higher People's Court. So most cases are dealt with the first level, the basic People's Court. And the intermediate People's Court, much higher cases or serious cases came to the intermediate court. Of course, generally speaking, if the cases with the foreigners, with the foreign businessmen, they usually go into the intermediate People's Court. But due to the cases, too many. So take Shanghai, for example. Some basic People's Court can handle the cases with foreign elements. And the higher People's Court, of course, they seldom handle the case, practical case. They usually, the main task of the High People's Court is give the what? The organizational work, give the instructions, and make the interpretations of the laws or make the implementation of the Supreme Court and so on. Only those very serious cases, they come to the higher People's Court. And the highest, the fourth level, the Supreme People's Court. Of course, in China, only one Supreme People's Court in Beijing. As third, about the Intermediate People's Court, as I mentioned just now, the main task of the Intermediate People's Court will handle the civil cases. And when they mediation in the court. So as I mentioned just now, in the arbitration case or in the court case, usually there is a process which will use the mediation method to solve the dispute, even both parties going into the People's Court. So, of course, usually at the last of the whole process, in the court process, the court make the argument, both parties make the final say in the court, or will nearly end to handle the case. The judge will ask the parties who are involved in the case, are you willing to settle the dispute through the mediation? If part A say yes, if part B say yes, then the judge will be the mediator to mediate the dispute. Because put the mediate process at the end before the court sittings, the judge knows which is right, which is wrong. The judge knows the main facts involved. The judge knows the legal backgrounds. So sometimes the judge will make the mediation to the two parties, or face to face, or back to back, Of course, judge sometimes give some pressure to the to some party in the dispute. The judge will force you to make some compromise and retreat. Of course, if one of the parties does not say yes to the judge, then there's no this kind of mediation in the court. Only the agreement reached by two parties, the mediation can be used in the court. So the last one is the jurisdiction. So this is very important to use the court system to solve the dispute. It's just like the arbitration. So according to the procedural law, there are 4 kinds of jurisdiction. One is jurisdiction by the levels of the court. So as I mentioned, altogether 4 levels. So if you try to solve your dispute, you must find the right court right call. So, as I mentioned, the Intermediate People's Court should have the jurisdiction as court of the first instance over the following civil case. I only list number 1. The major cases involving foreign elements. Of course, they are altogether number 4. So, all the cases involving foreign elements usually go to the intermediate court. And the second is territorial jurisdiction. So generally speaking, a civil lawsuit brought against a citizen should be under the jurisdiction of a peace court located in the place where the defendant has its domicile. This is the usual way. If you are in plaintiff, you have to go to the peace court in the place which the defendant lived. And the third is jurisdiction by transfer. Of course, the first one is a general one, a very common one way. And of course, number 2, almost the same as number 1. But jurisdiction by transfer is not often used in China. Only some circumstances, they may transfer from, for example, from the place which the defendant lived to another place. Maybe this place without any connection with the plaintiff or defendant. So they can transfer their jurisdiction over the cases. Usually, the higher level of the People's Court may have their rights to make the transformation. And the last one, jurisdiction by designation. Of course, this is also seldom used in daily life. Only special circumstances for some, you may find on the website some officials commit some crimes. They're very high officials. They're not at the place. Take for example, when officials in Shanghai make some crimes, they may transfer to the Jiangsu province or Zhejiang province in order to avoid the relationship. They have very good relationship with the local court, make the trial case more justified. Okay, as I said at the beginning, I just gave you the general guideline how to solve the dispute, the business dispute at most. And there are 2 special ways to solve the dispute among the businessmen. So here the theme of our seminar is the doing business with China. So many Korean investors want to invest in China. You have some disputes with the local government, then there is a way to solve this kind of investment dispute. So use the international way, not domestic way. to solve the dispute. So China is a member of the Convention on the Settlement of Investment Dispute between states and the nations of other states. It is renamed as we know the Washington Convention, Washington Convention. So there is an International Center for Settlement of Investment Dispute. So, of course, you have to go through the domestic ways. If they find no way to go, you can use. Of course, the jurisdiction by the ICSAT based on the arbitration agreement. And you have to arbitration agreement. Then the ICSAT can handle the case. If there's no arbitration agreement, there's no jurisdiction. Just as we mentioned just now about the arbitration in China. And the last one, the dispute settlement in the WTO. So someone mentioned, quite a number of professors already mentioned, China became a member of WTO in 2001. So under the WTO, there is a dispute settlement body. So almost 12 years has passed. Quite a number of cases China involved in the WTO, especially with the United States. So there is a role we call the DSU, Dispute Understanding, in the WTO. So the dispute settlement body, based on the DSU, to handle the case by the panels. So, as I mentioned, that China is one of the active participants in the dispute settlement body within the recent years. So we have nearly 30 cases with the other members in the WTO. So almost most of them, 2/3 of them are the cases with the United States. Of course, if you invest in China or you do business with Chinese businessmen, there's a dispute, you cannot resort to the WTO to ask them to solve your dispute. You have to bring the cases to your government and ask your government make the application to the WTO. So this is a special way, not the ordinary way. Okay, due to the time, thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Gao, for this very interesting presentation on the judicial system of China, especially in these elements of business dispute. Ima li netko možda neko pitanje za profesora? We'll handle some questions now. Thank you.
Dobar dan, mene bi zanimalo.
Možete pričekati samo sekundu da profesor stavi slušalice da dobije direktni prijevod pitanja. Okay. Hvala.
Bih vas molio kratke odgovore na par kratkih pitanja. Prvo je, koliko je prosječno trajanje civilnog spora u Kini?
Several. Would you repeat again, please?
How long does it take?
How long does it take to have a civil litigation in China? Starting today, will end in
That,
220 or whatever.
that depends the cases. If the simple cases, usually 6 months. Sometimes they will prolong the durations of the trial cases for 3 months. If the case is very complicated, then the judge will apply to the head of the court and to make another prolong. So
Okay.
far as I know, most cases within the 1 year.
Okay, does it mean if I start proceedings today and somebody appeals and we go to Beijing, it's within 1 year?
No.
Oh, yes.
You cannot go to the Beijing. Of
But-
course,
Of
Yeah.
course, litigation you have to have a chance to appeal.
yes, of course.
And you go up and up and up.
Yes. If you try the case at the basic level, you have to appeal to the intermediate court.
And then,
Then, no, that's all. Two try will be the final try. Of course, if you're not satisfied with the second or appeal decisions made, you may, we cannot the appeal. You may ask to what? To check to the, of course, the higher court. But there's no definite answer to you. Sometimes you can get the answer, sometimes not.
okay. The second question is, should we institute the arbitration, put it in a contract? Are the Chinese entities permitted to go to the foreign arbitration courts, say the ICC Paris, say the Stockholm, say the Vienna, say the whatever?
Of course, if you use arbitration method to solve the dispute, you have to the arbitration agreement, both in the contract or there's no arbitration clause in the contract, you may make the particular arbitration agreement. And of course, you can choose, that depends on both parties, businessmen in the contract they made. They can choose CTEC in China as the arbitration body. If there are any cases allows, they can resort to the CTEC. Or of course, you can choose the third arbitration body, such as you mentioned in Stockholm. It's okay if the other party accepts your ideas. Okay?
I'm just asking, are they permitted to sign arbitration clause saying the arbitration will be seated in Stockholm and we are going to use the, say, the English law and so on?
Yes.
Chinese entities.
Of course, you can. That depends the Chinese side whether accept your suggestions.
Yes.
If he accepts in the agreement mentioned, if the case is aroused, they resort to the Stockholm Arbitration Court. It's okay. Okay.
And now I have just a question. What are the average costs, say, of the litigation? In litigation on the civil court, on Chinese court, I assume you have to have a Chinese lawyer, right? The foreign lawyers are permitted to the arbitration as well, of course.
As the costs of the litigation or arbitration,
Yes.
in the court, there is a fees rate. You should know beforehand.
Okay.
Beforehand, according to the types of the cases involved, you should have to pay the fees. And arbitration, they also have some fee rate that in China usually depends how amount of monies, in the case. They depend on the amount to make some certain percentage, usually 3% or 5%, that depends.
So you have the fees based on a value. Okay,
Yes.
that's similar to creation system
Yes.
or the same.
Yes.
And if you are losing the case, how much cost are you paying? All to the winner or none? Or part of it?
That depends. The court or the arbitration courts support the percentage of in the case. Usually the losing party will pay the cost in the arbitration. But in the court system, there's no this kind of regulation.
Thank you for your answers. I think that we can go on and on for the whole morning, but it was very informative. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Ima li još koje pitanje možda, kojim slučajem? If anybody else don't have a question, I have a small question for you, Professor Gao. Croatia doesn't have many mid-size or big-size companies who are entering Chinese market in any way. So probably these methods are based for companies maybe like Badel or some other who is already working in China and has the capacity of doing if something goes wrong in this way. But most of the problems Croatian companies face when dealing with China are small traders who are ordering goods from China, maybe one container, 2 containers, $50,000, $100,000 of goods, and then maybe they didn't check the companies well, or something happens and they don't get the goods they ordered, they receive something else instead of the goods they ordered, or the goods are damaged. Can you tell us what you would suggest for these very small disputes, how to handle them, and what is the best steps for the small Croatian companies who just trade and don't do any investments or real business in China? Thank you.
So it's quite difficult for the small enterprise to go into China to handle the case, to employ a lawyer to help him to try to handle the case. Usually, as I think, is the best way. If there's any connections, take for the Chamber of Economics, if you get good relations with the chambers of Shanghai, if the case happened in Shanghai, you ask their help. And the other way is if you find your lawyers domestically, if he has some connections with the lawyers in China, in Shanghai, they may make the connection and interest the Chinese lawyers to handle cases. They do not need to go to China to solve the cases. Yeah, there are quite a number of ways to use the costly, not costly methods to solve the disputes. If there's no this kind of channel, if there's no any connection, maybe it's much more difficult.
Thank you. And I have another question, but
in case you have a dispute in China and you sue a company and you get, so you win the dispute, and in the meantime the company goes bankrupt, who gets the money first from the company? So do the workers get the first money, then the banks, then all the other suppliers, or what is that procedure of the payment from the company?
There's an order. Of course, the wages of the workers must pay the first, and then the tax, then maybe the court cost, and at last, usually at the last, you get the pay if you win the cases. Okay.
Hello, my name is Tamara Filash. I'm coming from Telephone. I just have a brief question. If the negotiations go sour and the case has to go to the court, my question is, do you need to go to the basic people's court, or you can go to the higher instance right now? Thank you.
That depends, the cases involved. Usually depends on the amount of money involved. If you take, suppose there's a case involving $1 billion, you have to higher court, even the Supreme High Court. If you $5 million US dollar, usually go to the intermediate court. If there's one just $10,000, maybe you go to the basic people's court.
Ima li još koje pitanje? I have another question which I was asked before, so I'm going to ask you as an expert in this field. A lot of foreign companies are usually ignorant and sometimes afraid of the connections between the political system in China and the courts itself. So especially when we are talking about foreign companies and Chinese companies being in some kind of a dispute, how can you explain, how can you make the foreign companies not to be afraid of the connections between the political system and the court itself, that the judicial system will be transparent and fair to the foreign company as it would be to the Chinese company? Thank you.
So legally speaking, the court system is dependent from the administrative regions. So they are dependent to try the causes, whether you are Chinese company or foreign company. But as Professor Yan said yesterday, if I'm a Chinese company, I have good relations with the local court in China. If the judges are quite familiar with you, I don't. It's hard to say at this time to try the case in the fair way. Of course, in my understanding, no judge can try the case if the Chinese company totally legally failed. No, only they can try the case in this way and try the case in that way. There's a balance. Maybe if you have guanxi, maybe he help you in some circumstance. Okay.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Ako još imate neko pitanje? Ukoliko ne, budući da se predstavljanje profesora Sayea i pitanja koja su bila i u ovom i u prošlom predavanju malo odužila i krenuli smo 10 minuta kasnije, mi bismo predložili da pauza za ručak počne sada, zapravo ona dolazi točno sada u vrijeme, sada je 11:15 kako smo predložili, da se hrana ne bi ohladila, pa da nastavimo onda po dogovoru za otprilike sat vremena ovdje sa predavanjem profesorice Yang o logističkoj industriji u Kini. Hvala vam puno.
Prisutne